We're now going to put the binding on our mini quilt. So first of all, you need to measure all 4 edges of your quilt and add on 10 inches. You'll then need to cut your strips from your chosen fabric. I'm doing mine 2.5 inches wide, and for my mini quilt I'm going to need 70 inches worth of binding. So I've got 2 strips of fabric here on the table because I've cut it off the width of the bolt, and I'm using the bumbleberries. Now on the Rudy the reindeer wall hanging I did before Christmas, I found a new, or a different, shall I say, technique of joining your binding pieces together. So I'm going to show you how to do that again today. I thought it was a really good way of doing it, and actually I found it a much more accurate way when I folded the pieces in half to press them. So you're going to need your quilting ruler if you've got one, and you need to find the 45-degree angle which is on your ruler. So this is mine here. So place that line, that 45-degree line, on the edge of your binding fabric. Now I've got 2 pieces together here because I'm going to cut through 2 pieces. And then at the end you need to find where the intersection is for 1/4 inch. So mine is just there, so that's the quarter of an inch square, if you like, just there. And you need to place that point on the bottom edge of your binding. And then next what we're going to do is we're going to trim off that triangle that's on the end there. So there you've got your 2 pieces. And then how it's going to work is taking your 2 ends, you're going to place them, let's get that round the right way, so they are right sides together, and then you have got then your 1/4 inch seam allowance to sew down that edge. So I'm going to do that on the sewing machine using my 1/4 inch foot, and we'll come back and have a look. And I'm going to press it open as well, ready for stitching onto the wall hanging. There are the 2 pieces of binding stitched together, and I've ironed the seam allowance flat. So you can see when you look on the front, you haven't got any of those little tails that you normally have when you're stitching your binding pieces together, and it's nice and even along the edges, which is fantastic. So I have gone along as well and pressed my binding in half all the way, and it's now ready to stitch onto our mini quilt. I'm going to go ahead and stitch my binding on, and then when we get to near the end of it, I'm going to come back and show you how I'm going to finish it off. I'm going to use a slightly different method this time to deal with the ends of the binding than we did on the Rudy wall hanging. You'll need to leave about 5 inches of binding unstitched on both ends, and I've got about a gap of 8 inches unstitched here. So what you'll need to do is lay one piece of your binding down, and I'm just going to pop it off the edge slightly so I can see it when I come to do my bit of measuring. Lay your other piece on top, and then whatever width you've cut your binding fabric, as mine is 2.5 inches, the easiest way to do it is, if you've got a spare piece like I have here, is place that on the edge of where the binding begins. So that's why we've just got that little bit sticking out slightly so we can see it a bit better. So pop that on there, and then using some sort of marker pen or whatever you use to mark your fabric with, just draw a line along that edge there on the right. Now, if you draw it along on the left and you cut your fabric off there, you'll find that your binding's not long enough. So make sure you do it to the right of this piece of binding. So you're using the width of this because this is the width of the binding that you've just sewn on. And then you need to snip that piece off. So to attach the two pieces of binding together, I'm going to just press, well, finger press this fabric across, which will then form a line across the middle, which I'm going to use as my stitching line when I get to the machine. So I'm just going to finger press that. And then taking your two ends of binding, pop them right sides together. This is probably the most difficult part, I think, because the fabric is fighting against each other where it's been stitched on and you want to carry on stitching it. Okay, so I'm just going to pop some pins along that line that I've just pressed a crease. And then I will go and sew that on the machine and we'll come back and see how it looks. So there is the seam pressed open on the inside and that fits along there perfectly. So I'm now ready just to finish the stitching all the way along here, and then that's the binding attached. Once I've finished that, I'm going to turn it over to the back. Let's have a look at this side. And you could either stitch in the ditch along this line, catching the binding on the reverse, or you could do some hand stitching. I think I'm probably going to do some hand stitching. So once it's all finished, we'll come back and have a look.